Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be reviewing all of the books that I read in April. So I read 12 books in April and I am just having a really good reading year, both in terms of the level of enjoyment I'm getting from my reading, but also the pace with which I'm reading. I feel like I've just got a really great momentum with my reading and I've really got into lots of different routines that help me make the most of my downtime and reading time. April was an interesting month for me. There was some ups and downs in many different areas of my life, like professionally, personally, all sorts of things. It was just a big month. And I feel like keeping up this really consistent reading pattern was something that just gave me a lot of routine in a slightly chaotic month and was a real comfort to me as well. I read quite a lot of books for younger readers in April as well. I think they just offered me a lot of comfort in, like I said, quite an up and down month. And 5 of the books that I read were books that I read for work. So just under half of my reading was work reading. And as always, I'm going to talk about those at the end. I'm going to start with the adult fiction I read. So I read Wahala by Nikki May. And this is a book that really took me by surprise because it's a book that is focused on friendship between 3 women. And they're all kind of going through that stage in life where they're looking at what each other is doing and how their lives are slightly different and they all feel slightly envious of what the other one has. And it explores how really close, intimate female friendships can feel strained during that time of life where your lifestyle and the things that you have achieved or things that you still want to achieve, how there's a division with what you're doing in the friendship group. And I'd read quite a lot of books that were around that kind of theme and I always thought I really enjoyed them, but some of the ones I'd read recently just weren't hitting in the way that I wanted them to. So I went into this book with it being about something that historically I have really loved but recently have been a little disappointed by. So it was quite a strange level of expectation that I went into this book with. And I think the reason why I enjoyed this so much was because of, I guess what is essentially kind of the crux of the plot of this book is a 4th woman entering into that friendship group. So we have Ronke, Boo and Simi, and then we have Isabel who nestles her way into the friendship group and starts to pull on threads in the friendship dynamics, watching them unravel, causing tension, pulling on strings that is just intervening in all of these friendships. And it always has this very kind of sinister undertone to it that builds really gradually throughout the book. And I think that's how a person like that would operate, how it would feel if they were operating in your own life. Like it would be little things at first until it gradually becomes more sinister. I think I've been really enjoying books like that take something that is a traditional plot that you maybe find in fiction targeted for women, things that explore relationships and friendship dynamics, but adds this kind of thriller twist to it. I've been really enjoying books like that recently. This book also gave me an insight into the mixed race experience in a way that I don't think I'd seen much in the fiction that I've been reading. Certainly not in a way that offers a distinction for the mixed race experience as opposed to, for example, a Black experience. This really specifically looks at having one white parent and one Black parent and what that means for your upbringing and how you feel about your identity and your cultural upbringing. And through that lens, there was discussion of a lot of things that I hadn't really thought of before, examples of colorism that I'd not really thought of before, and also internalized prejudice as well. It also put a lens to the tremendous pressure that is faced by women to strive and be successful and kind of have it all, and how that strain can actually cause real difficulty for women who are trying to live the best life possible. I really liked this one and would highly recommend it. The next book of adult fiction I read was Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, and this is certainly adult fiction. This is by far the spiciest book that I've read all year. I had so many Tessa Bailey books on my shelf. I think I've got, not counting this one because I've now read it, I think I've got 5 of her books on my shelf. So before I read this one, I had 6 unread Tessa Bailey books on my shelf, which is ridiculous. What if I'd read this and didn't like it and then suddenly I had all of those books on my shelf? So thank God I fucking loved this. This just offered me the perfect escapism that I needed in April. I loved this book. So this is about Georgette, who is the youngest sibling in her family. Her family have this like home renovation business, but she's decided that she doesn't want to be part of that. She instead wants to be a children's entertainer. Specifically, she's a clown. And she just feels like because she has this reputation of being the youngest castle sister, and she's also a children's entertainer, people just really don't take her seriously. They really like belittle her. They treat her like a child. And then we also have Travis, who is a former baseball player, hugely successful, famous in many ways, infamous for his dalliances with women. His playing career is over. He returns to their hometown. He is her older brother's like best friend. She had a huge crush on him when she was growing up, and he's trying to gain some sort of normality back in his life. He doesn't have a playing career anymore, but he's also like a celebrity still. And this intense attraction between the two main characters develops throughout the book. The chemistry that Tessa Bailey has crafted is just off the chart, and she's taken this fantasy that I suppose a lot of people maybe had when they were younger, of like an older sibling's hot friend, but also like the sports star that you fantasize about actually managing to like hook up with them. The level of chemistry and the spiciness in the smutty scenes was just kind of like, you know, when it makes your legs do the little kick? That's this. They are so into each other. They are both so hot. Towards the very end of the book, like it wasn't even really like the third act, like it was very, very towards the end. There was like a miscommunication, unnecessary drama added in, I think. But you know what? I can forgive and forget. If you have watched The Idea of You, the new Anne Hathaway film that is on Amazon Prime, I would recommend you read this. It's very, very different. Like there isn't like the age difference dynamic like there is in The Idea of You. But if you liked the themes and idea of you around like dating a celebrity, then I think you would like this book. The poetry collection I read was Teeth in the Back of My Neck by Monica Radojevic. This is the poet's debut collection, and it explores themes of ancestry and identity, sort of unpicking the history of your identity and the roots of your identity, and the feelings of kind of confusion and sadness that the poet feels around some elements of their identity. I used to read a huge amount of poetry years ago. It was one of the aspects of my reading that I was the most passionate about, and I feel like I'm just kind of out of the loop with poetry a little bit and out of sync with what my preferences with poetry are now. I've picked up a few collections recently that just haven't hit the way I wanted them to, and that's no criticism of the writing in them, it's just not the style that I gravitate towards. So for example, in this collection there are a lot of very long lines, and I'd say there's a focus on imagery rather than sound effect, and actually what I like in poetry is quite short, sharp lines with a real emphasis on sound effects. So I think I'm just not picking up the right poetry collections for me. I found the poet's perspective on everything she was discussing in this collection really thought-provoking and interesting, but just in terms of my poetic taste, it wasn't really there for me. So if you do have any poetry recommendations that have a real emphasis on things like sound effect, please leave them down below in the comments. The adult non-fiction book I read was Naturally Tan by Tan France. Now I'm going to preface this by saying, historically, I am a huge Queer Eye fan. I have not kept up with the recent like changing in cast and drama and fallout of that. I am so out of the loop. I don't really know what's gone on there. I actually listened to this one on audio. I really love listening to memoirs when I go on long walks, and that is why I decided to listen to this one. And memoir is the form of storytelling that I find I get on best with long walks. I feel like, I don't know, it just feels like someone's kind of keeping you company. They're telling you their life story. It feels a bit more conversational for like that walking activity. So I took myself on a hot girl walk. The weather was gorgeous. Like I was wearing shorts, and Tan France kept me company. I found this one compelling in the sense of, I think listening to most people's life story is quite compelling. Tan talks about his upbringing, how he got into the fashion world, how he built his businesses, and how tremendously tough building those businesses was. And then of course he takes us into the Queer Eye experience as well. There were some parts of this book that I didn't like. Like Tan gives a lot of advice in this book. Not only fashion advice, but kind of life advice. And I totally get that. Like I'm sure some people came to this book specifically because of that. You know, they know Tan France from Queer Eye, which is a show basically all about giving people advice on how to refine their lives. I found a lot of the advice he was giving like very like binary, and like he was saying a lot of stuff as if it was just like definitively the only way to be, which I just found like quite grating. I did enjoy having this peek behind the curtain of one of my favourite shows and learning more about Tan's life. And it was actually the perfect book for what I needed it to be in that moment. I also read 4 Eids and a Funeral, and this was just really cute. This was a very sweet love story. So we're following the friendship and relationship between Saeed and Tiwa. Growing up, they were very close, but following an incident that happened at Eid a few years ago, they haven't spoken. Saeed has also moved away to go to this quite prestigious school, and they have completely lost connection, and they're harbouring some resentment about that. One day, Saeed returns to their hometown for the funeral of someone who is very important to both of our main characters, and we're flipping between their two perspectives in the book, which I always really enjoy that as a storytelling device. On the same day of that funeral, the local Islamic centre burns down, and our two main leads end up joining forces to try and save the Islamic Centre. So it has this like enemies to lovers vibe to it, but it has like the additional dynamic of them both they used to be inseparable. They've then gone through conflict, and it's them kind of joining forces and reconciling along the way. This was just very, very sweet. Like, I enjoyed spending time with both of the main characters. There was a comfort in the kind of inevitability of them recognizing their love for each other. I also loved seeing all of their Eid celebrations. And this was another book that also touched on colorism in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. This is an early proof copy. The book comes out on the 6th of June, and I will be replacing my proof with a finished copy because I really enjoyed this one. I read Fake Dates and Mooncakes by Shir Lee. This is an LGBTQ plus romance that is centered around food, and I love foodie books. I think particularly in a young adult space, I've just read a lot of really good young adult books that have food elements to them. So like The Do's and Donuts of Love or A Full Love Story. Just a very specific niche that I really enjoy. So we have 2 male leads in this book, and the first of those, and really the I think central character to this, is Dylan. Dylan is juggling school and also working as a delivery driver for his aunt's Chinese takeaway. And I loved all of the like Chinese takeaway like details and all of the details around the food. I absolutely loved that, and I learned a lot about Asian cuisine broadly, but also kind of like specifically the things that we associate with Chinese takeouts. I learned so much about that food culture that was amazing. Our other male lead is Theo, and Theo is charming and extremely wealthy. Their paths end up crossing, and there's certainly a romantic and physical connection there. Theo convinces Dylan to be his fake date for a family wedding that has a lot of rich people drama. And I thought the difference in class dynamics between the two characters was really compelling to watch unfold, and how genuinely there can be conflict when you have that kind of difference in upbringing and class difference between two people that should just be seamlessly together. I do love fake dating as a trope. I mean, 2 of the books that I've read this month have a fake dating element to them. I just find it really interesting, that dynamic of how do you perform a relationship? Like, what does it look like when you are trying to pretend what you perceive a relationship should be like? I thought this was very sweet. I had a good time. It also features a baking competition, which I love. This really fulfilled the brief of, like I said, what I needed to read this month, which was just coziness. I also read Love, Frankie by Jacqueline Wilson, and again, really just fulfilled the brief of what I needed to read this month. Jacqueline Wilson was such a prominent writer in my childhood. You may remember a few years ago, during the lockdowns and pandemic, me and a few booktubers dedicated a whole week to reading Jacqueline Wilson books, and that offered us a lot of kind of nostalgia and comfort in that very strange time. And when I was going through a very strange time in April, reading a new Jacqueline Wilson book was just brilliant. So this is about 14-year-old Frankie and her journey of realizing her sexuality, realizing that she is into girls, figuring out what that means for her, and also this connection that she builds with another girl named Sally. And it really innocently and tenderly explores Frankie's realization that the way she thinks about Sally is not just that she's someone that she's really excited to have a friendship with. It's more than that. I also thought it was really realistic and important in how Jacqueline Wilson explores Frankie and Sally's different paces of coming to terms with their sexuality, understanding their sexuality, and how difficult it can be at that young age, trying to figure it out and trying to build on connections that you're maybe just not ready to build yet. Frankie also has a lot going on at home. So her mother has MS and her father has a new girlfriend. So she's dealing with all of that. I really just thought this was such a lovely story that felt realistic and honest, but also felt extremely hopeful for what it means to be a queer teen now compared to, how it was even when I was growing up, but long before that as well. There is so much more queer visibility these days, which I think is brilliant for teenagers realizing their sexuality now. The book doesn't shy away from elements of difficulty that teenagers would face, but it felt really hopeful and lovely, and yeah, I loved this book. Okay, so I'm now into the 5 books that I read for work. I'm going to try review these pretty quickly. But this first one is one that I think a lot of you would be interested in, and it's a non-fiction young adult book. Definitely one that I think has adult appeal as well, and that is Look What You Made Me Do by Kat McKenna. So as I said, this is a non-fiction book, and it essentially kind of explores fandom. So it explores kind of the history of fandom up to the modern day, looks at lots of things like gossip sites, TikTok, the community that fans feel, how being part of a fandom and community can give you a real sense of belonging and identity. It explores parasocial relationships that we have with people we're a fan of. I love kind of recognizing themes in my reading retrospectively. Like a few of the books that I read this month do feature kind of an element of a parasocial relationship. And this book really does explore parasocial relationships that we have with public figures and celebrities. But this whole book is specifically told through the lens of Taylor Swift. So obviously Look What You Made Me Do is a Taylor Swift song. All of the chapter titles in this book are Taylor Swift songs. There are lots of illustrations that are Taylor Swift. And she's the lens through which all of these topics are explored. If you're a fan of Taylor Swift, you will love this book. That's really a given. If you are going to the Eras Tour, if you are sad that you are not going to the Eras Tour, you're going to want to read this. While there are obviously biographical details about Taylor Swift in this book, it's not a biography. This is a book that is about fans and community and fan culture. And that, for me, is actually the thing that I love about being a Swiftie, is sharing that experience with other people. I also read Scandar and the Chaos Trials by A.F. Stedman. So this is the 3rd book in this series about bloodthirsty unicorns. It's hard to talk about this one if you've not read the first 2 books in the series. We are following on with our main character, Scandar Smith, and his education in being a unicorn rider. In this 3rd book, Scandar and friends are taking part in the Chaos Trials. So there is lots of kind of epic challenges that test their control of their elements, of their unicorns, of their understanding of their abilities. They stretch their abilities. They are using their intelligence to pass these trials. Meanwhile, we also have the situation developing with Scandar's older sister, which I can't really talk about because it will spoil it. I love this series so much. The ending of this 3rd book, oh my god, just oh my god. I read Dream Hunters by Nazima Pathan. This one is coming out in August. This is set in a reimagined India where dreams can be collected and bottled, and there's this real craft to dream collecting. But one day our main character discovers a plot whereby nightmares are actually being bottled, and the crown prince is involved in a way that is very corrupt. So our main character goes on this journey across India to prevent this plot from happening, to stop the crown prince, to save the king, and also to rescue her parents who have been falsely imprisoned. It is this sweeping and magical journey, and I just find that central idea of bottling dreams so gorgeous. It's an amazing adventure, and if you are someone that really loves storytelling and books that celebrate storytelling, then I think you'd really like this one. I also read The Boy Who Fell from the Sky by Benjamin Dean. So this is a middle grade sci-fi novel. We are following 12-year-old Zed, whose dad is a demon hunter. His dad is focused on completely eliminating demons from their world. Demons fall from the sky. Zed is kind of fascinated by demons and wants to follow in his dad's footstep of being a hunter. But one day, a demon named Spark appears. And Spark is in contrast to everything that Zed has been told about demons. He's just a kid, just like Zed. He is a frightened boy that just wants to go home. And this is ultimately a book that celebrates how amazing children are at overcoming prejudice, and how it is often the younger generation that is free from judgment of people that are a little bit different to them. Ultimately, it's a book about friendship and forming friendships with people that are different to you, and realizing that maybe you're not that different after all. But I also think what the book says about kind of questioning authority is really important as well. And finally, I read Can You Feel the Noise by Stuart Foster. This is a book that explores our main character Sophie's experiences of hearing loss and how that affects her day-to-day life, but specifically her passion for music. She loves music. She and her friends are entering a Battle of the Bands competition, but when Sophie goes through her hearing loss, she feels like those dreams are over. But when she meets another deaf musician, she begins to realize that her passion for music isn't over, and she absolutely can be a musician and take part in Battle of the Bands. The elements of this book that I thought were really subtly brilliant were just the ways that Sophie manages to kind of shield her hearing loss, the way she kind of develops these little techniques or things that she does so people don't really notice, or she can kind of get away with just making do instead of actually allowing herself to accept help and accept her situation. It's a very different experience, but I felt a real connection with that in terms of when I started to get really bad eyesight when I was about 9 or 10, and I just managed to kind of figure out these little workarounds because I just didn't want to acknowledge that I couldn't really see for shit. I thought this was a really great book, and it explored how brilliance can come from something that is a life-changing event. So that's it. They are all of the books that I read in April. Do leave me a comment down below if you've read any of these. Let me know what you thought of them. If you don't have anything in particular to say, but you want to let me know that you are here, leave me the clown emoji in honor of Fix Her Up. That's gonna look so savage, like you all just leaving clown emojis in my comments. If you want to connect with me elsewhere, my Bookstagram and my Twitter are linked down below in the description. That is it for me today. I hope you're doing well, and I will speak to you in my next video.